In the darkened streets of Brooklyn, a child named Alphonse Gabriel Capone was born. It was the last year of the 19th century, in a time when the world was on the brink of great change. His parents, Gabriel and Teresa Capone, had braved the journey from Italy, seeking a better life for their family in the land of opportunity. Young Alphonse, however, found himself immersed in a world far from the dreams his parents held. Brooklyn was a rough and tumble place, where survival often meant bending the rules. From a tender age, he got a taste of the underworld, lured by the allure of power and easy money that came with gang activity. His parents, hard-working immigrants, envisioned a peaceful, prosperous life for their offspring. They strived to shield him from the harsh realities of their neighborhood, but the streets of Brooklyn had other plans. Little did his parents know their son would grow to become one of America's most notorious criminals. As Al Capone grew, so too did his ambition, drawing him deeper into the underworld. Born in Brooklyn, New York, to Italian immigrant parents, Capone was no stranger to the hard-knock life. He was a bright child, but school was not his playground. The streets were. They became his classroom, his battleground, his realm. Capone's early criminal activities were a testament to his survival instincts. As a teenager, he joined the notorious 5 Points Gang, a band of hoodlums that ruled the streets of Lower Manhattan. Here, Capone was not just another member. He was a quick learner, a keen observer. His days with the 5 Points Gang were a crash course in the art of organized crime, but the Big Apple was just the beginning. The winds of change blew Capone to the bustling city of Chicago. It was the era of Prohibition, a time when alcohol was illegal, yet more popular than ever. In Chicago, Capone found a new playground, a new battleground. His move to the Windy City marked a significant turn in his life and in the annals of organized crime. In Chicago, Capone joined the Chicago Outfit, a powerful criminal organization. But Capone was not one to be lost in the crowd. His ambition, his audacity, his cunning set him apart. He rose through the ranks with an alarming speed, his influence growing with each passing day. Capone was not just a pawn in the game, he was becoming the game changer, the rule maker. His activities expanded from petty crimes to bootlegging, gambling, and even running brothels. His network grew, his power intensified. But it wasn't just about power for Capone. It was about respect, about making a mark. And mark he did. His name became synonymous with the Chicago underworld. His reputation, though notorious, was undeniable. Al Capone was not just a member of the gang, but was fast becoming its very heart. With the Prohibition era in full swing, Capone saw an opportunity and seized it. In a world where alcohol was illegal, Capone found a gold mine. He quickly set up an intricate network of speakeasies and breweries, smuggling liquor into the city under the cover of darkness. Capone's empire was built on the thirst of the masses, but it was sustained by something much darker: fear. He ruled his empire with an iron fist, showing no mercy to those who crossed him. His brutal tactics were legendary. From public beatings to cold-blooded murder, Capone stopped at nothing to maintain his hold over the city. And then came the event that would forever etch the name Al Capone into the annals of history: the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. On a cold February morning in 1929, 7 men were lined up against a wall in a garage and gunned down in broad daylight. The brutality of the crime shocked the city and the nation. No one was ever convicted for the crime, but it was widely believed that Capone was the mastermind behind the massacre. Despite the brutality of his reign, Capone was a paradox. To some, he was a ruthless killer, a symbol of the lawlessness and corruption that defined the Prohibition era. But to others, he was a Robin Hood figure, a man who provided a service that the government refused to. He often engaged in acts of public generosity, donating to charities and opening soup kitchens during the Great Depression. But behind the public facade, the reality was much darker. Capone was a man who thrived on power and control, a man who would stop at nothing to protect his empire. His reign was marked by violence, corruption, and fear. In the city of Chicago, the name Al Capone became synonymous with fear. The reign of Capone was a dark chapter in the city's history, a time when one man held an entire city in his grasp and ruled it with an iron fist. But every reign has its end, and Capone was no exception. As the roaring 20s turned into the tumultuous 30s, Al Capone's empire began to crumble. The man who had once seemed invincible, the very embodiment of the American dream gone awry, was finally facing his downfall. In the year 1931, Capone was met with the inevitable, an arrest that would mark the beginning of the end. This arrest wasn't for the numerous violent crimes Capone had orchestrated, nor for the countless lives he had ruined with his illicit liquor business during the Prohibition era. Instead, it was for a seemingly mundane crime that no one had expected: tax evasion. It was a strategy concocted by the federal government, who had been unable to pin down Capone for his more heinous crimes. The trial was a spectacle, attracting national attention. Capone, the man who had once strutted the streets of Chicago with an air of untouchable bravado, now sat in a courtroom, his fate hanging in the balance. The jury, swayed by the overwhelming evidence presented against him, found Capone guilty. He was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, a harsh sentence for tax evasion. But this was Al Capone, a man synonymous with crime and corruption. The sentence was as much about setting a precedent, showing the American public that no one was above the law. Capone's time in Alcatraz, the infamous island prison, was a far cry from his luxurious life in Chicago. The man who had once lived in a mansion, who had controlled a criminal empire, was now confined to a tiny cell. His health deteriorated, his mind plagued by syphilis. The mighty Capone, once feared and respected, was now just a shadow of his former self. The mighty Capone, once untouchable, was now just another inmate. The man who once ruled Chicago's underworld was reduced to a shell of his former self. After the glory and the gunpowder, Al Capone found himself caged behind the cold bars of Alcatraz, a place of isolation where the cheers of the crowd and the fear he once instilled were but distant echoes. His health rapidly deteriorated. The once vibrant mobster was plagued with ailments. He battled with paresis, a late-stage consequence of untreated syphilis that had taken hold of his body years ago, eating away at his sanity and strength. As his condition worsened, his mind, once sharp and cunning, began to fray. He started to lose touch with the reality he had once so masterfully manipulated. Capone's days of ruling with an iron fist were replaced with hallucinations and confusion. The once feared mobster was now just another number in the prison system, his reign a fading memory. In 1939, after 7.5 years of confinement, Capone was released on parole due to his deteriorating health. He retreated to his Florida estate, a far cry from the bustling streets of Chicago he once owned. He lived out his remaining years in seclusion, plagued by his failing health and the ghosts of his past. Then, in the winter of 1947, the end came. Capone, the man who had once been the face of organized crime in America, succumbed to his health complications. His death marked the end of an era, the era of the mobsters who ruled cities with fear and bloodshed. The man who had once been untouchable was now just a name in the history books, a cautionary tale of power and downfall. Al Capone, the man, the myth, the legend, breathed his last, but his story lives on. The echoes of his reign continue to reverberate through the streets of Chicago, reminding us all of the man who was once the king of the underworld. Al Capone, a symbol of an era, left a legacy that is still discussed today. A man of contradictions, Capone was both a ruthless gangster and a modern-day Robin Hood. His life was a twisted tale of ambition, power, and downfall that forever changed the face of American crime history. Capone's influence extended far beyond his time, shaping the way we perceive organized crime. His name became synonymous with the Prohibition era, a time marked by speakeasies, illegal distilleries, and rampant corruption. Even today, his life and crimes are a source of fascination, immortalized in countless books, movies, and television series. His portrayal in popular culture often romanticizes his life, painting him as a charismatic anti-hero rather than a violent criminal. This skewed image, in a way, reflects our society's complex relationship with power and morality. Though Al Capone's reign ended decades ago, his shadow still looms large over the annals of American history.